So as many of you know, biological filtration is naturally occurring in a fish tank, whether it be freshwater, saltwater, or a coral reef. That biological process converts waste from one form to a lesser toxic form. It just converts. It doesn't get rid of. So you as the hobbyist need to come up with a solution for removing the end result of the biological process. In the past, that's been done with water changes. There have been some filter medias that I refer to loosely as Johnny Cat. It's actually a clay or a zeolite that absorbs nitrates. There are other medias. One that I again loosely refer to as coffee grounds that has the ability to absorb nitrates and phosphates. Well, as the coral reef hobby advances, those levels of waste become even more critical as far as algae issues and affecting the growth of the corals. And so you really want to strive for a means of trying to eliminate, again, nitrates, phosphates, which are all the end result of basically the biological process. We're en route down this morning to Reef Dynamics. That's Jeff Macare, known in the past as the Protein Skimmer King. He's now picked up a new line of Bio Pellets, and Jeff's going to explain to us this morning how that whole bio process or Bio Pellets process actually works. So come along with us as we run on down to Orange County and see what Jeff has to tell us about Bio Pellets. So we've arrived down here at Reef Dynamics. We're with Jeff Macare, and Jeff has a new product referred to as Bio Pellets. Jeff, tell us a little bit about what Bio Pellets are and what will they do for us?
Well, Bio Pellets have been on the market, I think, in the aquarium trade for, I'd say, about 2 years now, maybe a little bit longer. For those people on the inside in the know, maybe a little bit longer. But basically, what the Bio Pellets are is they're a biodegradable polymer. The higher quality ones, the ones that we are using, as far as I understand them, are created out of the effluent from the fermentation process of different, I don't know if it's beer or different fermentation processes, but they take that foam and stuff off the top, which is very rich in sugar, and they turn it into these bio pellets through some process. And what I wanted to talk to you about today was what they did and how they work, and most importantly, I wanted to show you our new bio pellet reactor. So let me explain to you a little bit about how the bio pellets work. Basically, the pellets, you put them in a reactor, and they tumble in the reactor, and the bacteria grow on the surface of the bio pellet, and they consume the bio pellet, and as part of their metabolic process, they also consume nitrate and phosphate right out of the water. So, as you can imagine, once you have them in the reactor and you have water flowing through that's oxygenated, they're going to get to work. And they're little machines. They turn on and they start doing their job. And as long as they've got food for energy, they're going to consume nitrate and phosphate.
The machines, you're referring to the bacteria themselves, okay?
Exactly. Yeah, we'll call them as a metaphor machines, because what's important to understand about and what's critical about having a properly designed bio pellet reactor is the machines don't know when to shut off. For example, on this system here, I did my last test. I've done 3 major tests on the bio pellets, and the last one was with the reactor. I allowed the nitrates in here to get it to about 50 parts per million, and the phosphates to about 5 parts per million. And needless to say, it didn't look so good.
Those are pretty high levels.
Yeah, exactly. But I did it on purpose, obviously, because I needed to monitor the function of the reactor based on its design. Early on, people had problems with bio pellets, and the primary problems they had was they would set them up, they would run, and they would start to consume the nitrate and phosphate, but they would strip it from the tank, especially if the water flow through the reactor was really high. because the bacteria don't know when to stop. As long as there's something there, they're going to keep consuming it. So what would happen is the nitrates would fall to zero and the phosphates would fall to zero, and the system would crash because the corals require some amount of phosphate for calcification. And a lot of the soft corals especially like a little nitrate in the water, part of a nutrient source for the algae that live inside them. And so people would see their acroporas bleach, soft corals would bleach, and the tank would crash. And so what they found out is that because the system stripped, the bio pellets stripped the water so quickly, they would try to reduce the amount of bio pellets or try some way of managing the process. And what I thought was a better way to do it would be to create a reactor that allowed you to have independent control of the suspension of the pellets and the flow through the reactor. So with our system, basically you can control the flow of the pellets with using this valve here. So you can get them really whipped up and cranking if you want to. And at the same time, the pump is pulling water from the system, right? That's how it feeds water into the reactor, and it comes out here. And then with this valve here, you can actually have a control of the amount of water that's going through the reactor. So as you turn this valve back, the pump's still pulling in a lot of water, but it restricts water leaving the reactor, which it's completely independent. It has no effect on this right here. So you can have all the suspension you want. You can have it very violent, or you can have it very mild. I tend to like it a little more on the mild side, and then control your flow through the reactor independently, which is the ultimate. So what my experiment is I put this reactor on the system with nitrates at like 50, I said, and phosphates at 5, and I started to monitor. Every week I would test. After about 2 weeks, the bio pellets were activated, and the nitrates started to drop. At 3 weeks, they were down to 40 parts per million. Phosphate was down to about 4. After about 4 weeks, the nitrates were down to 30 parts per million. The phosphates were about 3.5. And after 6 weeks, the nitrates were down to about 15, and the phosphates were down to about 1 part per million. So at this point, I thought, okay, well, that's come down pretty quick. So I'm going to slow the flow rate in half, going out of the reactor. So my process rate. And what I found after that was, over the next following weeks, the nitrates went down much slower. They went from, say, 15 parts per million down to about 11, and then 8, and then 5. And right now they're hovering at around 1 part per million. I haven't got it zeroed out because I find that, like, I have a lot of soft corals, and especially the green leathers in the back. I mean, you can see them right now. They're really light colored, but they still have a nice green in them, and they're really healthy. In previous tests, they all shrunk up and almost died. Same thing with the Sinularia here, or the Nephthia, because it was just too quickly, all the nutrients were gone. So at this point, the phosphates are about 0.05 ppm, which is a perfect natural level, and the nitrates are about 1 to 2. And I can control that by the flow rate through the reactor. You can also control that by the amount of pellets in the reactor. The more pellets you have, obviously more surface area, more bacteria, more food, so you could have an even slower flow rate through the reactor. Or you could have less pellets with more flow rate through the reactor. But needless to say, you have control over it, which is really important. The reactors that most folks have been using, basically it's just like a carbon reactor or any kind of other media reactor where the amount of water required to suspend the pellets dictates the flow rate through the reactor. And that's always way too much water. I mean, you can see the amount of water we have going through here.
When in Los Angeles, make it a point to stop in Long Beach, California at Age of Aquariums, 2642 Cherry Avenue, just off the 405 freeway near Signal Hill. At Age of Aquariums, their knowledgeable staff showcases designer aquariums featuring colorful corals and exotic fish, a spectacular 4-sided 500-gallon living coral reef, along with a wide selection of coral frags and a large selection of saltwater fish, the cute, the graceful, and the not so cute. Age of Aquariums also carries a selection of popular freshwater fish for the beginning hobbyist. Along with a full line of aquarium supplies and supplements, Age of Aquariums quarantines and medicates all their new fish and proudly provides LA and Orange County's largest aquarium maintenance service. Age of Aquarium is located at 2642 Cherry Avenue, just off the 405 freeway near Signal Hill. Open 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday and 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Saturdays and Sundays. For more information, dial 562-438-6252 or visit ageofaquariums.biz.
Let me stop you and ask a couple of questions, and these would be basic understanding. So, what I have here is a separate cylinder or column or reaction chamber, and you're supplying the water from the sump?
Right.
And that's coming from where?
It's just in this last chamber here, the well.
Okay, so this blue line that we see here attaches to some kind of a pump in the sump.
No, this pump pulls it from the sump.
Aha, okay, so the pump on the reactor right here is sucking through the blue line water from the sump.
Yeah, so you don't need a pump to feed this system, which, like our calcium reactors, same thing. They are self-feeding. And that's, again, really unique in the market. Most folks are having to use a feed pump. And as long as the reactor is close to the sump, close enough, these pumps will pull water and fill the reactor. After you get it primed, it'll fill the reactor all
Okay, so prime, that was a key word there. So any difficulty in getting that little pump sitting outside the sump, sucking from the sump to prime itself?
No, basically, this is the loop here. Water comes in the top, into the suction of the pump, out, back into the reactor. So as long as the water level is here, which basically you'd fill it up,
okay,
and you plug it in.
So when I'm ready to start setting on my unit up, as far as getting the pump primed, I would have water in this reactor here, and that's obviously going to flood this water pump here, sending probably a little bit of water back to the sump. But as soon as I turn it on, it's going to want to suck it through their prime, maybe burp for a moment as it expels an air bubble out of there.
Right.
And then from that point, this pump right here, part of the reactor, is pumping water into the cylinder, yes?
Yep, exactly.
Okay, and that's kind of doing two things, if I understood. One, obviously it's sending water into the reactor, which ultimately, I assume, goes back out via that white line back into the sump.
Yep.
And two, that's also helping to suspend the bio pellets.
Yep, fluidize it. Yep.
Fluidize, like a fluidized filter bed. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, so mechanically then there's a pump on the reactor that sucks water into the reactor. It's responsible for suspending the bio pellets and sending water back to the sump.
Exactly.
Now you had mentioned a little valve in there at some point.
Right here, yeah.
Okay, and that's to do what? Obviously it restricts the amount of water leaving the reactor going back into the sump?
Yeah, this is where you control the function of the reactor. So the more water that passes through the reactor, the quicker your nitrate and phosphates are going to drop. The slower the water goes through, the slower those levels are going to drop.
Okay.
So again, you have an independent control over suspension of the media, fluidization, and process of the water.
Okay, and you're using one pump, but since you're restricting the flow there, it doesn't restrict or alter the flow that the pump's generating, which is always going to keep the balls suspended or the pellets suspended.
Yeah, because it takes water from the reactor and from the sump, so that's not cavitating or being restricted in that way. Yeah. This is basically just causes, when I turn this valve back, it causes more suction here, and that's what pulls the water. If I have this valve all the way open, very little suction's happening here. So my process through rate's going to be, here you can see, you can watch. So right now, there's basically, it's dripping out what water was in there. There's no water going through the reactor. Now as I close this off, it'll start pulling water through here. There it comes.
Oh yeah.
And now I can, and so I pull this back a little bit so I get my suspension. Right?
Right.
So now I've got suspension in here. I got a good flow rate. So So let's just say at this flow rate, on my 70-gallon tank, I have the reduction of nitrate and phosphate we talked about. As soon as it starts getting to the lower level, all I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to throttle this valve back. Oops, if I can get it the right way. And I'm going to restrict the flow rate through, so I've got a stream. Nothing's changed here. Pellets are still being fluidized. But I'm processing less water through the system, so I'm stripping less phosphate, less nitrate out.
And what determines, or what tells you to determine the rate of flow through the whole reactor back to the sump? The results of the tests that you're taking?
Exactly.
So this unit wants to really, as you use the word strip, remove nitrates and phosphates real quick-like.
Yeah.
But that may be too quick-like.
Exactly.
And so you control that speed by A, determining how quickly it's happening by measuring or testing your water, and then B, by restricting that valve there,
which
decreases the flow through the whole unit.
Yep, exactly.
Okay. All right, now let me ask another question.
Sure.
This media, the pellets themselves, you mentioned it was made as a result of some byproduct of some other beer processing or something like
fermentation of some kind.
Fermentation of some sort. So these are biodegradable pellets?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so what's happening? These are the pellets they use. They mix these with plastic polymers to create biodegradable plastics.
Okay.
So your biodegradable cups, forks, knives, spoons, anything biodegradable plastic has these types of pellets in it. There's different types of them, different polymer configurations, but this is effectively what you're using. So what this is the raw biodegradable polymer. It doesn't have the copolymer in it. And there are some pellets in the market that do have copolymers in them, and they've got their own problems with algae growth and things like that. But this is the purest original product. This comes from Holland. These are about 2.5 to 3 mil pellets. We have 5 to 7 mil pellets coming. They'll be for industrial aquariums, like public aquariums and stuff.
And so the pellets serve two purposes.
Certainly.
One is the attachment sites for bacteria, like bioballs.
Yep.
And then two, once the bacteria is attached to them, they begin to consume the pellet.
Yep, it's food.
It's food for them. And is it consumed 100%?
Yeah, eventually the bio pellets are completely consumed.
So if I never replace the bio pellets, all these pellets would eventually disappear?
Yes.
Make it a point to come on back for part 2 as we discuss how much bio pellets are required and how long it'll be before you have to replenish them.